Grew up poor, have to share room with big sis. Room is tiny, so we really bitch about having each other's stuff in our zones. She gets the huge plant leaf thing from IKEA with her allowance that she saved up, hangs it on the wall between our beds so it's kind of like a partition. First night it's up, I'm staring up at it from bed, sort of at an angle so I'm looking partially underneath it, if that makes sense. It makes a really weird shadow on the ceiling that looks like someone looking over the edge of it. It freaked me out, but I didn't say anything, would just have gotten laughed at. Every night for like 6 months I look up at this thing and think how weird the shadow is. Can't figure out what it is, seemingly no cause for it. One night I'm looking at it and I almost convince myself I can see eyes, almost like that reflection animal eyes have, but way duller. Actually getting kind of freaked out. Suddenly I hear from my sister's bed, "You see it too, right?" Both of us flip out and turn on the light. Of course nothing there. Take the leaf down and try to forget about it. Turns out she'd been seeing it for months, always in the same spot, always looking down at me.
63. Abandoned farm in the middle of England. There is a farm owned by a man called John Glass. If you are lucky enough to find this farm, John will happily take you to see his animals and will treat you with utter kindness. He will keep you there until nightfall, when he insists you must stay over and drive back in the morning. Not wanting to disrespect this old man, you agree and settle down for the night in cozy room. In the morning you will wake up on a mattress-less bed. The room will be dirty, smelly and old. The rest of the farm will too, with a few rotting animal carcasses in the fields. There will be no sound except for faint squealing sounds. You will find that the sounds are coming from a run-down barn, and, if you dare to peek inside, you will see yourself bound and gagged. You will watch John Glass torture you in ways you couldn't even imagine. Then, you will wake up in your own bed with no memory of the day before. You will search for an abandoned farm. As soon as you see it, you will decide to move there and renovate it. You will forget about your old life. A year later, an unsuspecting traveler will come to your farm. You will happily take them to see your animals and treat them with utter kindness.
In the building above, there was a storage area in the loft, 15 up est. You could only get to via a ladder we kept outside. One Saturday, like most Saturdays, we had a wedding, some dumbass boot 19-yo Marine most likely, they almost always were. Anyways, service is over, everyone is in the next building over for the reception except me, the priest, and the bride. I was the facility manager, waiting for them to GTFO so I could lock up. When they asked me to sign as a witness, just about then we heard a baby crying. In a building I just cleared. Directly above our heads the priest and the bride went white as a sheet. I probably did too. Priest, you hear that too? Me, nope. Let's GTFO. Bride, yeah, it's a baby. Me, no, it's not. Let's get out. P, we have to check on it. M, no, I have to check on it. But you just volunteered to hold the ladder for me. I go out back, bring in the ladder while the priest watches the only way in or out of the loft, a hole in the wall 15 up, and the crying stops as I lean the ladder up on the way. I climb up, and nothing, not a goddamn thing. Just our plastic nativity scene storage, minus the camel. Baby Jesus was right there. I covered it up with a sheet and locked up. I didn't like working there.
Airlock. When the game starts, you're alone in a bunker. You'd cross off another day on the calendar and start to check your gear. You prepare to leave for the nearest town. You strap on your gas mask and pull up your hood. The green light on your oxygen gauge tells you that you'll be able to survive in the airless environment outside. The world was brought to a complete standstill when the air started dissipating. Most didn't know what was happening before it was too late. It wasn't how humanity had figured it would end. All in all, it was a very silent, quick affair without the big explosions or the screaming masses fleeing. In fact, no one could have imagined a quieter apocalypse. People simply fell where they stood or sat at the time. There wasn't time to evacuate, and where would people have gone anyway? Those who survived were the people who had planned ahead, who had prepared for the impossible. Their reward was solitude on a lifeless, airless planet. But at least there's plenty of time to think and reflect. The end happened so quickly that the destruction was limited. You have entire cities open to exploration and treasure hunting. Only you have to watch your air gauge. The air gauge itself is on your suit/clothes, not on your UI, so you have to look down to see it. If you forget it, you might end up fucked unless you can somehow find air. You move around empty schoolyards, apartment buildings and skyscrapers. The lack of air preserved the billions of bodies worldwide relatively longer than they otherwise would have been, and now the empty planet is a mausoleum of dried up human husks littering streets and buildings. You'd have to scavenge for stuff to improve your gear, so you could stay out longer. Through exploring, You might find other safe bunkers, and you'll be able to move around more freely. And then there'd be the enemies. What would they be? Something that doesn't require air, which could stalk you and make you feel watched. A less open threat that might attack when you least suspect it. And would there be others? Maybe, you'd have to find them first. Would you even go armed? No air would mean no sound, so all you'd have was the clicking of the gas mask, and maybe whatever contemporary band you managed to put on that banged up, scavenged iPod you managed to find in the pocket of a body near the airport terminal. You'd have to consider getting fuel for the generator in your safe house, as well. Your only contact with other people would be some guy or girl, I guess, who you talk to frequently over what's left of the internet or some shit, or some old radio type thing. Like, you've known him for years, never seen him. He's your only company in an otherwise dead world, and he's holed up somewhere else, exactly like you. One day, he stops signing and going on the air, and you decide to find out what happened to him. You only have a faint idea where his bunker is, and you know you wouldn't have enough air to get there in one stretch. And that's where the game really begins. Do you make an effort to find him, or find out what happened to him? Or do you just go on with your life, salvaging, exploring and listening to your own breathing as you make your way through the still graveyard of humanity?
I moved into my house 5 years ago. The last 2 years there have been strange things happening. It started in October 2004. I noticed strange footsteps but soon shrugged them off, thinking there was probably an explanation for them. My 16-year-old son, Michael, slept in the only bedroom that was downstairs while myself and his little sis have our bedrooms upstairs. I would wake up in the morn with Michael sleeping on my bedroom floor. He at first heard strange noises, then he seen shadows moving across the room. He came running from his room one day because his plug flew from the wall. Yet again I put it down to electrical faults. He's felt something brushing him too. I have been with my partner Mike for a year now, and he moved in with me in April. At first Mike couldn't sleep with the noise of someone moving about up and downstairs. Always checking but nothing there. He would always say, "Did you hear that?" I was just used to hearing them. 4 months ago, Mike was sitting at the computer which is beside Michael's bedroom door, and he jumped up with a pain. He lifted his shirt and there was a deep scratch on his stomach. There was no sharp instruments about and there was no possible explanation for this. The computer always acts up for him but no one else in the family. I am also catching shadows out the corner of my eye and put it down to my imagination. We were lying in our bed 2 weeks ago watching telly. I lie nearest the doorway and I seen a flowing shadow going into my daughter's bedroom. Mike jumped up and shouted he saw it too. For once I was completely freaked out. I had to sleep on other side of the bed. Everything was forgotten, and then 2 days ago Mike was sitting on the computer chair again holding a piece of drawing paper in his lap. The paper hit him in the eye and took out a chunk from his kamea. He is in complete agony and has been attending hospital. He cannot explain how the paper hit his eye from the angle he was holding it on his lap, but knows even if he tried to do it himself it would be impossible. At first I thought it was just a mischievous ghost of some kind, but now I am starting to get very worried with this thing assaulting my partner. It is no longer mischievous but evil. I wonder if it is the shadow that has always been with me that I have always seen from the corner of my eye since, or is it something that was already in house? 2 weeks ago my son came screaming from the bathroom, saying he'd seen a face all bloody, and wrapped in a dirty sheet. He killed himself last Friday and we are all devastated beyond words. His note said, "I got it, Mom. Check the camera."
It's been 49 hours since my light went dead and left me in the dark. The 14 dots from my wristwatch can show nothing in this total vacuum of light. Nothing but count down the time to my ending. I busted the crystal so I could feel the hands, gingerly running my finger lightly over the face. There is nothing but waiting. Every now and then I see a small dot of light, the random wayward photon activating my retina, or a stray particle passing through the earth, nothing more. Just a split second of false hope followed by nothing but black. The darkness must be getting to me as I feel my mind slipping away from me. The only thing that keeps me partially sane is the torrent of sound made by water running beside me. It reminds me of a fan running in the quiet bright of outside night. The darkest room is as the surface of the sun compared to this place. To think I came here for fun. The lack of luminance is wreaking havoc on my mind. It swirls and spins in a vertigo of 3 days drunk. The walls spinning like the eye of a tornado, if only could see them. I vomit the water and lay down against the cool rock, praying to every invisible deity for mercy. I retch and vomit again. Groaning against the earth, I think about killing myself and laugh when I realize I can't see to make it painless. The spinning slows to an out-of-control teacup ride, and I drink some more water. The irony of being trapped here next to liquid life has not escaped me. 3 weeks. That is the figure I read once, that the average human can survive without food if they had a steady supply of water. Combined with the 6 power bars in my pack, I could cling to life for a month. Maybe a month and a half. 6 weeks of darkness, vertigo, vomiting, and water. The humorous part is it might be the best tasting water I have ever had. We found your son's body inside a small cave about 500 feet from the path, ma'am, the park ranger explained into the phone connected to the weeping woman. As near as we can tell, he was exploring a small cave when the ceiling caved in. He had some power bars and was next to a stream. Are you sure you want to know that? Okay, the preliminary report is saying he lived about 3 weeks. Death is listed as starvation in conjunction with exposure. No ma'am, he wouldn't have been able to dig himself out. There wouldn't have been any need to. Well ma'am, I mean your son was on the outside of the cave-in. Only about 10 feet inside the cave. Ma'am, I know you are distraught, but we must have not been around to heard him cry for help. Well, the coroner believes a stone fell and struck your son in the head, causing a minor subdural hematoma in the rear part of his head. No ma'am, he wasn't unconscious. It means that your son was rendered almost instantly blind.
If you ever are in an area of absolute quiet, still your breathing and move not a muscle. After a few seconds, you will notice that the silence has a sort of sound of its own, a kind of empty ringing tone. This is nothing unique, everyone will hear this, given the proper setting. An informed person will tell you that your brain is trying to interpret the lack of stimuli to your hearing and so creates a bit of a filler sound. Actually, there is never, ever, total quiet anywhere on Earth. This sound actually covers something very important. For a persistent individual, one can discern what is under this pitch. The next time you are in such a situation, shout at the top of your lungs for about half a minute, then become completely silent all at once. It will be different for everyone. Some will hear nothing different for dozens of tries, others might catch a snatch of soft murmuring. A special few might clearly make out what they hear on the first attempt. What you will hear is a voice that relays an account of events about to happen in the immediate future. It's like a sportscaster relaying the events occurring 10 seconds later. Such an ability would doubtlessly be invaluable, no? You will be able to react to any immediate danger, relate to people around you with greater ease. No one would ever surprise you. As time goes on, you will be able to make out this voice under increasingly noisy circumstances, to the point that it can be heard at any time by just concentrating. Now, of course you are wondering what sort of horrible catch there is for this.
I found this picture in an envelope at my grandfather's house tucked into the bookshelf. He didn't want to talk about it, but I was so fascinated by his reluctance to speak that I begged and begged until he finally gave in. Only if I would never mention it again. He had been on a camping trip with his Boy Scout troop as a kid. They had all gone on a long hike before dinner when one of the scouts, Davy, run off up ahead like he was being chased. The scoutmaster yelled at Davy to wait for everyone else, but he had already rounded the turn. They all sped up to catch up to him, but he had disappeared from view. He wasn't on the trail up ahead and there was a lot of dense brush all around. They started calling his name but got no answer. The scoutmaster instructed some of the boys to go to the ranger station to get help while my grandpa and some others continued the search. My grandfather thought he heard some rustling in the bushes and went in that direction and came upon a clearing with a tall rock in the middle. These 2 boys were at the top of the rock eating as he took the picture and then ran back to the rest of the group. By the time they returned, the boys were gone, but now they knew where Davy was. His eyes had been removed and there were bites taken out of the middle of his body which had been dragged to the top of the rock where those boys had been eating. No one ever found those boys and the story was that wild animals had eaten Davy, but my grandfather knew the truth.
In June of 1972, a woman appeared in Cedars-Sinai Hospital in nothing but a white gown covered in blood. Now this in itself should not be too surprising, as people often have accidents nearby and come to the nearest hospital for medical attention. But there were 2 things that caused people who saw her to vomit and flee in terror. The first, being that she wasn't exactly human. She resembled something close to a mannequin, but had the dexterity and fluidity of a normal human being. Her face was as flawless as a mannequin's, devoid of eyebrows and smeared in makeup. That's the other reason people were throwing up or fleeing in terror. She had a kitten clenched in between her teeth, her jaws clamped so unnaturally tightly around it to the point where no teeth could be seen. The blood was still squirting out over her gown and onto the floor. She then pulled it out of her mouth, tossed it aside and collapsed. From the moment she stepped through the entrance to when she was taken to a hospital room and cleaned up before being prepped for sedation, she was completely calm, expressionless and motionless. The doctors had thought it best to restrain her until the authorities could arrive, and she did not protest. They were unable to get any kind of response from her, and most staff members felt too uncomfortable to look directly at her for more than a few seconds. But the second the staff tried to sedate her, she fought back with extreme force. 2 members of staff holding her down as her body rose up on the bed with that same, blank expression. She turned her emotionless eyes towards the male doctor and did something unusual. She smiled. As she did, the female doctor screamed and let go out of shock. In the woman's mouth were not human teeth, but long, sharp spikes. Too long for her mouth to close fully without causing any damage. The male doctor stared back at her for a moment before asking, "What in the hell are you?" She cracked her neck down to her shoulder to observe him, still smiling. There was a long pause. The security had been alerted and could be heard coming down the hallway. As he heard them, she darted forward, sinking her teeth into the front of his throat, ripping out his jugular and letting him fall to the floor, gasping for air as he choked on his own blood. She stood up and leaned over him, her face coming dangerously close to his as the life faded from his eyes. She leaned closer and whispered in his ear, "I am God." The doctor's eyes filled with fear as he watched her calmly walk away to greet the security men. His last ever sight would be watching her feast on them one by one. The female doctor who survived the incident named her the expressionless. There was never a sighting of her again.
It's July 1954, a hot day. A man arrives at Tokyo Airport in Japan. He's of Caucasian appearance and conventional looking. But the officials are suspicious. On checking his passport, they see that he hails from a country called Taured. The passport looked genuine, except for the fact that there is no such country as Taured, well, at least in our dimension. The man is interrogated, and asked to point out where his country supposedly exists on a map. He immediately points his finger towards the Principality of Andorra, but becomes angry and confused. He's never heard of Andorra, and can't understand why his homeland of Taured isn't there. According to him, it should have been, for it had existed for more than 1,000 years. Customs officials found him in possession of money from several different European currencies. His passport had been stamped by many airports around the globe, including previous visits to Tokyo. Baffled, they took him to a local hotel and placed him in a room with 2 guards outside until they could get to the bottom of the mystery. The company he claimed to work for had no knowledge of him, although he had copious amounts of documentation to prove his point. The hotel he claimed to have a reservation for had never heard of him either. The company officials in Tokyo he was there to do business with? Yup, you've guessed it, they just shook their heads too. Later, when the hotel room he was held in was opened, the man had disappeared. The police established that he could not have escaped out of the window. The room was several floors up, and there was no balcony. He was never seen again, and the mystery was never solved.
It was a few weeks ago that the hay bales started creeping slowly away from the house. Every morning when I woke up, each had moved a few hundred feet from where it was before. I assumed it was pranksters with nothing better to do, and I ignored it. Within a few days, though, the bales began to approach the boundaries of the farm. I was tired of the whole game by then, and decided to move them back. It took a tedious hour to bring them all from where they were to over near the house again, and by the time I was done I was ready to snap the neck of whatever little pissant was deciding to screw with me. The next morning, I found each and every one of my horses messily decapitated. The smell was what woke me up. Each one was slumped over against the side of its stall. There were no signs of the heads. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and burying the remains. It was only when I was done that I noticed the bales of hay had all returned to their positions from the day before, scattered far out into the fields. This time I left them where they were. That night I sat on my porch with my shotgun in hand and a pot of coffee on the table beside me. I sat for hours, straining my eyes into the fields to catch a glimpse of who was moving my hay bales. Finally, I was beginning to nod off. I would have, but just as my eyes began to close I heard a clamor and a rustling of trees from the nearby woods. I leaned forward, my heart racing with excitement. I was going to catch the bastard. I fumbled with my gun and fidgeted in my seat, waiting anxiously for whoever it was to get close enough to ambush. It was only when the thing got close enough for me to make out its silhouette in the dark that I was frozen still. The thing that crept into my fields from the nearby woods didn't seem to notice me sitting there. It stalked, hunched and deliberate, through the field with the posture of a tiptoeing thief. If not for the fact that it must have towered to over 10 feet tall even in its crouched position, it might have seemed almost frail. The thinness of its arms and legs and the emaciated, caved-in quality of its chest reminded me of a starving animal. Still, this thing was undeniably strong, and watched it hoist each bale up into its arms with ease, and set it down carefully a while away, taking only a few strides to cover the distance. I watched it work, moving each bale thoughtfully. Every once in a while it would straighten up to look around at the other bale's positions in the field, before adjusting the one it was working on ever so slightly. Before it left, it looked towards the house. I felt its eyes sweep over me in the dark, but whether it saw me or not I couldn't tell. Then, it turned silently and crept back the way it came, disappearing into the dark of the woods. It took me an hour before I had the courage to move at all. I went inside after a while, but didn't sleep that night. It was only when the sun rose that I dared step off my porch into the fields. The hay bales were where it left them. Strangely, it didn't move them as far as it had in the previous days. They were approaching something invisible in the fields, and as I looked at them I realized that they seemed to be marking some line. Indeed, as I walked around the house, I saw the distinct circle that they formed with me at the center. At first I thought the bales were just being haphazardly moved away from the house, but now I could see that they were instead being moved towards some boundary. The thing was sending me a message. I slept uneasily that night, and only because I was exhausted. The next morning the bales hadn't moved at all. They didn't move at all for the rest of that week, in fact. They were finally where the thing wanted them. I made myself sick trying to interpret them. Why would this thing expend so much energy moving my hay bales, and threaten me with such violence should I try to interfere? Killing my horses was just that, a threat. An intelligent threat, at that. It knew what would scare me, and it knew that I would understand the implications. The sound of an automobile working its way along the road to my farm one morning gave me a little rush of excitement. I'd been planning to abandon the farm since I saw the thing, but I couldn't hope to leave on foot without risking it treating me like it treated my horses. But, if I could get in the car with whoever was coming my way, I might be able to escape before it could stop me. I didn't know or care who it was. I decided that the moment they stopped the car, I would jump in the passenger's seat and tell them to get the hell out of here. I didn't get the chance. The car worked its way slowly along the road, trundling across the uneven ground. I urged it silently to hurry. It was when it passed between the two bales placed on either side of the road that I began to hear a booming clatter from the woods. The thing burst suddenly from between the trees, sprinting on all four of its terrible, painful limbs towards the car. Within a few seconds it was there, pouncing on the automobile like a predatory cat. Within moments it was picking and peeling the vehicle's steel frame apart, working to get at the driver. The man, whoever he was, screamed all the while, and I could hear him even over the crunching of metal and the shattering of glass. It was only when the thing crushed him carelessly in its hand that the screaming stopped. It tossed him away, and straightened up to look at me once again. In the sunlight, I could see the inhumanity of it. It was composed entirely of something awful and alive which was lashed together in a messy semblance of a human form. Whatever it was made of looked so polished and hard, that if it weren't for the minute writhing of the stuff, I'd think it was made of granite. The thing retreated back into the woods, and I was left to my shock. My eyes wandered to where the car sat, the engine still sputtering, between two of the hay bales. Suddenly, I understood. The message was clear. I am this thing's captive, and I am not allowed visitors. Nothing may cross the borders it has set. I'm trapped here, by the thing that stalks the fields, and it demands nothing except that I never leave. Still, I don't know if I can handle being that thing's canary. I've been thinking hard for the last few days since I saw it crush that man's chest and silence him before he could finish his scream. If I crossed the hay bale border, it'd probably do the same. It'd smash my skull before I could put my hands up to protect myself. It'd row and find a new pet, and probably keep looking until it found someone who could stand knowing that it was waiting just outside, watching it at all hours with its shiny, insect eyes. I've been thinking hard for the last few days, and I might just make a run for it.
What is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you? When I was 21 I had a waitressing job at a local brewery that happened to be in a mall. My parents, who I'm very close to, came and visited quite often. One night, around the busy holiday season, my parents stopped in for a drink after shopping and right before close. After a double shift I was exhausted and just wanted to go home, but I sat with my parents for a pint. It started to snow and my dad offered to go wipe my windshield off. My mom and I watched through the window as he tracked outside toward my car and then stopped. He stopped dead in his tracks and then started to make his way in the opposite direction of my car. My mom and I watched, wondering what in the world he was doing. After about 10 minutes he went toward his car and sat in it for a while, just staring at my car. My mom and I were baffled by his behavior and starting to get annoyed. After about 15 minutes, he came back in. We were about to yell at him, annoyed that he never even went to my car, when he asked the bartender to call the police. This was before cell phones were a commodity. My dad came back by us and we were speechless. What in the world? My dad saw a van parked very close, almost next to my car, so that the sliding door was right next to the driver's side door, where I would go to unlock it. My dad sat and watched this van not move and a male driver in it, staring at my car and the brewery exit. When the police arrived, luckily 2 cop cars, they somewhat cornered the van so he couldn't speed off. It turns out, after a lot of questioning and finally taking him in, he had abducted 3 girls in the state and was famous for a chilling cold case of a famous girl finishing work and coming out to her car at the mall. I literally, to this day, have no idea how or why my dad suspected something, but I know he saved my life.
They first appeared in the late 60s. The summer of love was dying out and a new, darker season was beginning. It was time to play. It was the time of the kooks. The kooks are small, malicious entities that resemble horribly disfigured children. Their eyes are pitch black, reduced to slit-like cracks under swollen eyelids. Their mouths are contorted into hideous leering grins that stretch from ear to ear. If a kook is happy or excited, it grinds and gnashes its sharp, minuscule fangs. The kooks prey on children. They always choose a lonely and ostracized victim. One who is bored, frustrated and in need of friendship. The child's cries for companionship are answered slowly, and quietly. Kooks commence their hunt on the first day of summer. They listen intently for the cries of help echoing around and are drawn to ones they feel are the most profound. At first the kooks are little more than a whisper in the woods that reaches out to the child's bedroom window. If she hears their calling, the victim is drawn to them inexplicably. The first call of the kooks only comes during daylight hours. It is not the time to draw the attention of adults. The child may spend her first days of summer vacation wandering the woods in search of the friendly, laughing voices. All through this time the kooks are stalking their victim, analyzing her, probing her, looking deep inside her for what they need. Mere moments before the child gives up her search, the kooks will appear. To the innocent child the kooks appear as nothing less than beautiful fey children, bathed in sunlight. In that single instant the child yearns to be with them, to be just like them. It is what she has always wanted. Naturally, the kooks will oblige. Then, the fun begins. Endless summer days playing in the fields and meadows. Warm, bright hours packed with jokes, games and laughter. It all seems so wonderful and timeless. Each day that the child spends in the company of the kooks draws out longer and longer. She returns home during late afternoon at first, then as the kooks' work begins in earnest, it gets later and later. Eventually their prey arrives back in the darkening evening, pale, exhausted yet eerily content by now. Even the most neglectful parents are becoming concerned. At first they were happy that their little angel had found new friends. These kooks, is that what she called them? It was strange. How come she had never brought them home with her? Then, one day, their child doesn't come home at all and they panic. The unnaturally long, hot summer is ending. The skies cloud over slate gray. A chilling breeze picks up in an alarmed community where an innocent child has gone missing. More often than not, the child is never seen again. She vanishes without trace. Only the most determined parent will discover the terrible truth of the kooks. The father searches the woods frantically all night until dawn. And then he finds them, his daughter's 2 best friends, and he screams. His little angel has her back turned to him. He calls for her to come home, but she can't, not now. She turns her grossly distorted head and looks at him with narrow black eyes. She doesn't want her daddy anymore. She's a cook. All that will ever be found is her father's remains, a terrible, shredded mess. The police think rabid dogs did it. Only animals could do that to a man. The summer is over, and the kooks are little more than a name to chill those left behind.
Me sends son out with garbage bag, comes back telling me it ripped in half. Did it fall on the ground in the sidewalk? Son tries to reply with bullshit answer I don't know, and maybe, Fucksers, yell at him while I run for gloves and go outside, walk down apartment complex and pick up garbage with trash bag I asked my son to get. Dad, the trash makes me want to puke because of the wind. Jesus fucking Christ. Stand to the fucking side and then you won't smell it. Finish up and walk to dumpster, lol. The other half of the trash bag is sitting on the wall next to dumpster opening. I thought you threw the other half away. Dad, I never said that. Send him off to grab another bag, pick up the rest of the garbage and toss it into the dumpster before he returns. Look to my right and notice the neighbor was fucking the shit out of some big-tittied inflatable doll off the side of his balcony on the 3rd floor. Holy fucking keck. Walk back to the apartment and find this thread on 9. So what have you delinquents been up to today?
Being a gook. Since 2 to 3 years ago there was ancient aliens tier rumor that President Park is indoctrinated and being controlled by handful of secret society called 82, the 8 Goddess, and they're ruling Korea from behind. Everyone laughed at this crude joke rumor. Suddenly a week ago whistleblower confirmed this shit was real. The 8 powerful Korean billionaire women formed secret society and ruled Korea from behind the veil. Whistleblower stole PC and tablets from them, open to media, confirming they did it all. They made decisions, from Park's text of speeches, reforming taxes by their own, maintaining national treasury, deciding every diplomatic moves from Toto, assigning secretaries and ministers by their own. Only one members of the 8 Goddess identity confirmed. It's former psychic woman named Choi Son-sil. According to the leak, she indoctrinated President Park since age of 23. Yes, a psychic woman whose member of secret society indoctrinated the president. I ain't joking. DFW, everyone didn't believe this anime plot tier batshit insane absurd news. Seriously, who's gonna believe this? Then suddenly President Park made news conference yesterday. She confirmed this leak is real and asked forgiveness. DFW, a country's president confirming that she's indoctrinated by the secret society at the news conference. Everyone panic. People started to get shits together, gathering informations about them. After digging, it's confirmed that shitloads of men are in jail right now for leaking the truth about the 8 Goddess. Politicians who's in jail right now mentioned Choi and 8 Goddess right before they went jail. People found photos that Choi escorting Park since her age of early 20s. Diggings found U.S. ambassador report documents. It's saying Choi Tae-min, Choi Son-sil's father, is fully control of Park's body and soul. Choi Son-sil's whereabouts is mystery. She's somewhere in Germany. DFW, politicians and whistleblowers tried to warn us about them years ago and we didn't listen. The whole country is panicking like shit and the government lost its ability. DFW, this is just beginning. DFW, there's more leaks to come. DFW, this is reality. DFW, every single TV channels in Korea talking about this. DFW, politicians preparing impeach STW, this ain't anime plot. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Google Choi Son-sil. I ain't even joking, haha, I've had enough.
2012. Used to have really bad night terrors and sleep paralysis. Had a recurring dream that used to really fuck me up. Starts with me waking up and not being able to open my eyes. Start to become aware that someone is in the room with me. Struggle harder to open my eyes. Can't move. About then is when I realize I'm dreaming and that I know what's going to happen. No matter how hard I try, I can't prevent it. Even if I stop struggling, at some point my eyes always open on their own. There's a face literally inches from mine. It's mostly in shadow. The mouth is wrenched open and the eyes are rolled down staring at me. Looks like someone silently screaming furiously. It's not human. Face is all wrong. Eyes are all wrong. My heart stops, and then I wake up for real. Usually because I've been holding my breath. Now that I am older I only have it once every few years. Still fucking sucks.
Be me, 6'5 plus 280 pounds redneck, I mean total redneck. Trump lovin', Confederate flag wavin', gun totin' trailer livin' redneck, live 10 miles from nearest town, 2 miles from nearest neighbor, sitting on beanbag chair in living room of double wide whilst eating a cherry popsicle and watching Longmire on Netflix, got a semi-BC Vic makes the spaghetti roll, hear car pull into driveway, WTF.jpg. Not only is this weird because of distance from town, it's also 3 a.m. Look out window, shitty 80s Oldsmobile wagon pulled into yard. 3 teens in full scary clown costumes step out. There's been a string of thefts on nearby farms. Figure it's connected. Throw on a pair of jungle boots and cowboy hat, leaving the rest in the nude. Grab Draco AK pistol on the way out of door. Can see they are sneaking around by my other trailer. There is 2 on my property. Use other one for storage but it has more lights on and looks more lived in. Sneak up behind them. Jump behind the biggest one, whom I am a solid 7 inches taller than, was gonna yell wanna die. Or what the fuck? But brain went full autist and combined the two, yell wanna fuck? All three turn around to see a 6 feet 5 inches overweight redneck wearing nothing but a cowboy hat and combat boots, carrying an AK, with lipstick red lips that just ask them if they wanna fuck. Look down and realize all the adrenaline turned the semi into a throbbing, pre-cum leaking full on. Never seen anyone run that fast in my life. MFW, I'll bet they never try the clown prank again.
Defiantly, bro. I'll Greentext it for ease of reading. Be out hiking with two mates, in an area southeast of Adelaide. Sun starts going down, so we come back up the gorge, walking along when it starts smelling like blood or copper, something like that. Halfway up here, something moving in the bush. Shit, there's three of them. One to the left of the track, one to the right, and one behind us, standing dead still, not making a noise. From the bottom of the gorge, hear this ungodly scream. It sounded like a woman screaming for help, but in reverse. The three things start to move close. We all nope the fuck out of there, sprinting up the gorge. Jesus fuck, why is this thing so steep? Smoker friend starts lagging behind cause fucking lungs. He's screaming at us, wait guys, fuck, wait, come back, fuck. I slow down to his pace so he doesn't get jumped. These things are right behind us but still hidden in the scrub. They are making noises like a dog trying to speak human. Oh shit, there's the car, run niggers. As we get to the car, I turn around and see this pale ass man-sized thing slink back into the scrub. Hear what sounds exactly like my friend in the scrub. Wait, goose, come back. It screams again. We nope the fuck out of there. Nobody believes me but my sister. It was terrifying. It happened a little under 6 months ago. Haven't gone back since.
Early 80s, worked at a Boy Scout camp in Ohio. Kids would always be doing stuff in the wee hours of the morning. Because they were kids, part of my job was to pretend to care about getting them to go back to their tents and sleep. Primarily because if they didn't, they would be tired the next day and not want to do Boy Scout stuff. One night we get informed by a scout leader, adult, that kids ran off and are missing. I head out with a flashlight, very familiar with camp area, and most kids end up in the same general areas, and aren't too good at staying quiet. Spend a solid hour looking for them, starting to get pissed since by now most kids have given up and gone to bed. It is now almost 2 a.m. Ask on radio if kids have been found. They have not. A little while later, see something, get a weird feeling, move the flashlight and stop walking. It's the kids, all huddled together and crouched down. They're scared out of their minds and crying. These kids are all at least 12, looked closer to 15 or 16, 7 of them. I walk toward them and ask what's wrong, because they're clearly spooked. Kids won't talk greater than get on radio. Tell other workers where I am and that I found the kids. Eventually one of the kids starts blubbering, trying to tell me what they saw. He describes some terrible monster or ghost or something. I can't understand half of what he's saying. Other worker gets there. We get the kids to their feet by physically pulling them up and making them walk back to their tents. I'm up until past 4 a.m. talking first to the boys and their leaders, then to the camp director, who was mad we woke him up, and finally to the police, who made me walk back out to where I found the kids. Still don't know what spooked the kids, but they all demanded they go home, and they did the next afternoon.
Another, this one's pretty cliché, but because it's so old I like it anyway. Way back in the 1920s, shortly before my great-granda went to prison, him and his friends were playing poker at the pub. Then this man in an immaculate black suit strolls in and says in an accent that was anything but native, the sort of fancy, educated Atlantic accent that you'd hear on the TV, "I'll need some shelter for the night. Do you mind if I sit down for a few with you men?" And he was welcome to the game. For the first few rounds nothing seemed strange, but after a few he started to play insanely well and began to clean them all out. My granda dropped something, most likely a card, and reached down to get it. On his way down he noticed that the man had cloven hoofs where his feet should be. He got back up trying to look as though he had seen nothing, and the man in the black suit looked at him with a deadly serious stare. He knew what he had seen, and my great-granda knows that he knows. Nothing happened to my granda, but one friend who lost died later that week. Could have been a goat man. Yeah, them pesky goatmen and their poker hustlin'.
Be sometime in the early 1920s, feel like going for a walk around the town, get dressed for the occasion, put on my Sunday best. While taking my usual route I notice there are dark clouds gathering overhead, fearing the worst, and not wanting to ruin my suit. I duck into a nearby pub, glance around and note the rather rustic interior, realize that I noticeably stand out due to my attire, pay the thought no mind and confidently stride about, make my way over to a table where numerous gents have seated themselves, notice they are playing a game of chance, and I request to join them. They welcome me, obviously not recognizing me as the first place winner of the Poker World Championship, try to hide my abilities and give them a fighting chance, but eventually give in to my urges, proceed to rake it in. One fellow opposite of me drops a card, notice that he takes several minutes to retrieve it. When he sits back up his entire demeanor has changed, thinking he may have cheated. I give him a knowing glance. Several hours later I'd won nearly all their money. One of the men had bet more money than he had on him, so he said that he'd pay me later. We shake on it, a gentleman's agreement of course. A week later or so, I hear from a neighbor of mine whom was acquainted with the gent that he had passed. Mourn the loss of my short-lived friend, until I remember he had failed to pay me back in full. What should I do? /x/. All these years later and I still don't have those $12. BTW, I'm a goat.
Well, I have a few. Used to live in the Yukon where there's a bunch of abandoned buildings and old shit from when the gold rush happened, as well as just being overall old. But this one happened at this townhouse that had a murder occur in it, and then some old guy died in there as well. Live with my mother and little brother at the time. Technically evicted out of one place after the place goes up in flames. Move into this new place, which was oddly cheap, pretty nice place. Know nothing about its past yet. First night there, go up the stairs in the middle of the night. In the corner of my eye there's a dark figure, tall, pitch black, darker than the house currently. Even the light from the bathroom doesn't seem to give this fucker any form of viewable features. And he's tall enough that it had to be hunched over in the room. Did I mention he was in my little brother's room, standing over his bed? I want to run, I can't see its eyes if it had any. But I knew they were now fixated on me, but it doesn't come. It just sort of stands there for a moment before disappearing, and when I say it disappeared, it didn't take off in a plume of smoke or some shit like in a movie. It was instant. Just gone. I was relieved to find my brother wasn't in there at the time, so I just went back to my room and freaked out a bit in there. Anyway, it turned out the one murder in there had been pretty fucked up. Some woman was kidnapped, beaten, raped and tortured for days before being set aflame. All in that house. And throughout the next few months we were in there, that black figure was seen by several of my other family members. After that, me and 2 other people started having intense nightmares for days. It was pretty fucked up.
Happened this past summer, and recently. Beautiful day hiking well-loved paths, deep in a woods in a park nearby. Thorn patch for more than a mile, only one real path through the bush. Heading home and just out of thorns, get weird vibe and turn to look back. No sound but see a figure in all black including one of those Fiat-brimmed caps. Continue on, heading home keeping eye on weirdo. Appears around every bend. No sound. Decide to climb tree and see where he/it goes. Figure looked like an adult male but I couldn't make out face. Passed beneath tree. Make out silver circle on hat. Man thing looks around before heading back the way he came.
And just today, taking dog for a walk, decide to chance North Trail, haven't been in a while, cross-filled and reach fork in trail, just before first bend of North Trail stands figure, all black, sweatshirt and pants, dad hat.jpg, it's fucking 13 degrees Fahrenheit out, just standing there, pup freaking out, take South Trail instead, see figure behind me entire time, disappears about half a mile into walk. By that time I had crossed from state park into county. The sense of foreboding was palpable. I've met hunters in the woods who have said they've seen whatever it is too, all sorts of weather and seasons.
I want to tell you a story, it's the story of a man you see. My great-grandma was a real nice old lady. She had a nice little old lady house. We used to go there a lot before she passed away several years ago, and my grandparents tore it down to build a new house for themselves on top. One thing I distinctly remember was her attic. Boy was it fucking scary. It was dark, only one light bulb would work. And you had to be real careful because there was a lot of exposed insulation, so if you stepped off the boards to get around you'd probably fall straight through the ceiling into the room below. But it wasn't so much the atmosphere of the attic. The fact it was dark, dusty and smelt a little weird. It was the story my uncle and my dad used to tell me about the attic. And now I'm going to tell you. A very long time ago, when my grandpa was just a little boy, they moved into this house. It was nice, 2 bedrooms, a nice bathroom, dining room, kitchen. My great-grandparents made a very decent living. My great-grandfather owned a very successful body shop. My great-grandmother sold Avon. One day my grandpa was playing in the living room when there was a knock at the door. He answered and there stood a man. He was wearing a nice suit, holding a nice hat against his chest with a polite smile on his face. "Hello there, Junior," he said, "is your father home?" My great-grandfather approached the door, suspicious. "If you're selling anything, I'm not interested, thanks," he said, before trying to close the door. "But no," this stranger interrupted with a start. No, sir, I promise I'm no salesman. I'd just like to talk if you wouldn't mind." About what? My great-grandfather asked. I was wondering if I could take a look in your attic. You see, I used to live here in it. It would really bring back some memories. The man was nervous, but my great-grandfather wasn't about to fall for any conman. Sorry sir, my wife's about to finish dinner. Not interested. So he shut the door and ushered my young grandfather away.
A day passed, and it was another hot summer day. My great-grandmother was fixing my grandpa lunch when she heard a knock. Wallace, could you get the door? She called to great-grandpa, who sighed and obeyed his wife. It was the man again. Now see here, mister, I already told you, I don't want some stranger in my house. You leave me and my family alone before you upset my son and wife. And if you upset my son and wife, I think there's going to be some trouble. Please, sir. The man pleaded, wringing his hands. It'll only take a moment. I absolutely must get up there if even for 10 minutes. This time my grandfather didn't give him the liberty of a goodbye, only a slammed door. A few days passed, peaceful playing, working, the life of your average Canadian upper-middle-class family took place as usual. My great-grandfather, great-grandmother and grandfather sat eating dinner one evening. I like to imagine they were having my grandma's, this is what I called her, roasted chicken and potatoes, so delicious. But I digress. Again, a knock at the door, it sounded important. I swear if it's that son of a bitch asking to get in our attic again, I'll be tuning his clock, but good. My great-grandpa muttered, getting up. Wallace, please, nothing in front of little Jim. My great-grandmother cried, it was the man, Anne. He was not, however, alone. He was with another man who looked similar. Now sir, before you chase us away, please understand we're brothers and we absolutely must speak with you, he said before my great-grandfather could curse him out. Up and down. Well, spit it out then, man. Now you've gone and interrupted my supper after a long day's work, and this had better be good. My grandfather threatened. Tell me, sir, have you ever heard strange noises in your house, scratching, shuffling, maybe even light moaning from your attic? The new man asked calmly. My grandfather turned stone cold. His son, my grandpa, had often whined of scratching and other sounds, to which both his parents attributed to maybe mice. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't, why do you ask? He answered coolly, crossing his arms. The men at the door exchanged worried glances. If only you'd let us come up to your attic, you could come if you like, but it would be better if you told your son to go to his room, your wife to the kitchen, and for us men to go upstairs.
So my great-grandfather told my grandpa to go play, asked his wife to clear the table, and led the men up into the dank attic. They used it for only storage. There were no real reasons to come up here, ever. The two men looked around. They knock on the wood of the walls in the attic in various different spots. Knock knock hollow, knock knock hollow, knock knock not hollow. My grandfather froze as they nodded at one another before turning to my great-grandfather. Now sir, please believe us when we say we'll pay for any damages that need to be fixed, and that what we're about to do may be very shocking, maybe even frightening to you, so you may very well not want to see what's about to happen. My great-grandfather pondered right then and there about turning his heel and wading downstairs, but no, he had to be the man and stay for his family's sake. Go ahead then, what's in there? He asked. He wished he hadn't. The two men pulled at the boards, peeling away the old wood fairly easily. My great-grandfather felt vicious bile build in his stomach and throat. The smell, oh God, the smell! His body was frail and gnarled, his skin was a ghostly white, his bare teeth yellow as freshly boiled sweet corn. His eyes were open, glazed over and staring. The pupils were milky, he was blind. The white were barely that, instead they were bloodshot to a point that was almost unbelievable. His fingernails resembled long, brown talons. Horror filled my great-grandfather as the two men bowed their heads. It's him, said one. The other only sighed and covered his nose with his sleeve. This thing, this remnant of a once living man was dead, but freshly. That was when my great-grandfather had reached his boiling point. Now you had both better explain to me right now just what in God's name is going on here. Is this some sort of sick joke? I ought to blow the brains out of both of you where you UW the brains out of both of you where you stand, he bellowed. Sam, go get the blankets from the car, I'll explain. One man said as Sam nodded and left. Sir, please understand, we're no monsters, you see, this is our brother. He began fretfully, looking at the mangled creature in the wall. Your brother? You sick sons of bitches locked up your own brother in the wall? My great-grandfather cried out, placing a hand on his queasy stomach. Never, sir, never, said the man. My father just passed. We never even knew this poor boy existed our whole entire lives. My other brother and I, now it would seem our brother here was born with some sort of mental retardation, something that my father and mother couldn't handle as parents, so they chose to do the unthinkable rather than face the public with their shame. He explained, motioning for the shell of a man. Mind you, this story takes place in a time when something like a mental defect was seen as a terribly embarrassing thing.
My grandfather held his head, he looked at the dead man in the attic, then back to the stranger. Get this thing out of my house, send someone over to patch up your mess, and then never, ever come near my family again, you hear me? He ordered. You can rely on that, sir. We had not wanted to bother you in the first place, but we couldn't sleep at night knowing some poor family was stuck with him living up in your walls. You see. He probably was sucking the moisture from the ceiling and eaten bugs and mold, I would think. It's amazing he could have survived. My grandfather solemnly said nothing. He only watched as Sam returned and the two men bundled their strange, demented and dead brother, leaving with a courteous thank you followed by a repairman and a generous fruit basket a day later. When my grandmother asked what had happened, my grandfather could not bear telling her. Rats, he said. Just rats.
Hey Alex, sorry about the delay. I fell down the stairs at my place and screwed up my back. This past Wednesday, roll up to Romero Research Institute to pick up Franklin. It's the usual business, everyone is at their cubicles and I walk by, no one looks up, the elevator ride is boring, but Therese music now. Idle piano music, but it makes the ride seem shorter, no other parents waiting on their kids today. I check my watch, I'm early, I lean up against the wall next to the elevator doors and cross my arms. Franklin's teacher opens the door and steps out into the room, holding the door open. Dad is directly behind her carrying Franklin. The right side of his lip from his top lip to his right nostril is stitched up. Jesus Christ. What happened? I rush up to him, but the teacher puts her arm out, stopping me. I shove her arm off of me and Dad hands me Franklin. He's asleep right now. I had to put him under to sew up his lip. Dad explains, he fell down during playtime today and split his lip open. His teacher explains, stepping between Dad and I, fell down? What, onto a pile of knives? I ask, cradling him into my arms and stroking his head. He's a little boy, David. They get hurt. Dad explained, putting his hands in his pockets. We've notified his mother, she authorized the procedure. Franklin's teacher explains, what? Why didn't anyone call for me to come get him earlier? I ask, it wasn't necessary, we have the facilities here to keep him comfortable, and with the other children at her house, Franklin's mother thought it was best for him to finish the day so she could prepare the children for when he gets home. Dad explains, shrugging, he needs to go home now, David. Franklin's teacher explains, they both turn around and the teacher shuts the door behind them. Yeah, I bet. I whisper to myself, Franklin stays asleep through the whole ride home. I roll up to his mom's house and she's waiting outside. The other boys are outside too, standing beside her with their therapist standing behind them. I get out of the car and walk around to Franklin's door. His mother waits patiently as I open the door and unbuckle him. She takes him out car seat and I'll thank you, David. It's been a long day for all of us. She says, walking inside with him. The boys follow, each holding the hand of their therapist. I leave. I'll report to Central that after that Franklin probably won't be going to school Thursday or Friday. I was wrong. I get a call from Central early in the morning explaining that Franklin is going at his usual time. What the fuck? I roll up to Mom's house. He's outside and so is she. They're holding hands. I open the door and she plunks the car seat in and buckles him into place as well. Did he sleep well? I ask, like a rock. Huh, buddy? She asks, rubbing her nose on his. He sits there and doesn't react. They go through the morning I love yous and see you later alligator stuff. I watch and he doesn't seem very animated this morning. I figure it's the drugs keeping him docile so he doesn't rip his lip open. She pushes a band-aid over his stitches and kisses his forehead before closing the door. He's going to go the whole day, but I'll let you know if he has to come home early, Mom explains, patting my shoulder. Shrug and deliver him to RRI. On the ride there though, Franklin tells me his headaches are gone, and that he dreamed about angels living on the sun. I smile to him and ask him if the angels like it on the sun. No, they can't get off the sun. That's why Jesus is coming back. I stare at him for a minute, and then redirect him to talking about policemen and firemen. I didn't want to push him and trigger some bad memory. As we come into school, he holds my hand before we even get inside the building. As we come into school, He holds my hand before we even get inside the building. The people in the cubicles get up as we come in and smile to him. Good morning, Franklin. The lady with the boyfriend says, waving to him. He smiles and waves back to her. I smile and nod to them as they watch us get into the elevator. The music is some low-tempo jazz music and Franklin hums along with it. Do you know this song? I ask him. No. He replies before going back to humming. The elevator door opens and Dad already has the door open waiting for Franklin. Franklin lets go of my hand and heads into the doorway. The elevator doors start to close and I step out. Hey, you got a minute? I ask, trying to get Dad's attention. Sure, David. He says, stepping out of the door and shutting it behind him. What's up, pal? He asks, crossing his arms over his chest. He was telling me about how angels are trapped on the sun, and that's why Jesus is coming back. I explain. Dad chuckles. You're right to be alarmed. He explained, turning back toward the door. Is he okay? Ask. He'll be fine, David. See you later. Dad explains, shutting the door behind him as he heads into the hallway leading to the classroom door. Act later, and Franklin is waiting for me as the elevator door opens. His teacher is standing behind him, hands on his shoulders. Good afternoon, David. Franklin's teacher says, Good afternoon. I reply, he had a great day today. She explains, offering Franklin a yellow Skittle. He bites it out of her hand. She laughs and ruffles his hair before pushing him toward me. She turns away immediately and heads for the door. I kneel down to him. Do you like Skittles? Ask. No, he explains, picking up his backpack. Why did you eat it then? Ask. Because I like the yellow ones. He says, smiling at me. I shake my head and stand up. As we exit the building, the people in T cubicles get up again. See you tomorrow, buddy. They say one after another. The ride goes normally. He wiggles his feet in the seat and hums the jazz song again. Friday is pretty much a rerun of that. He just asked if I could find a DVD of Blaze and the Monster Machines. End.
I work at a fast food joint on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. I work the night shift, so I'm routinely trapped in that place until 2 in the morning. It's not that bad though. I get paid extra for working late, and I don't have class until the early afternoon. The downside is that it's spooky as hell. The restaurant is located the corner of a block in a lower income area. It's a very strange place for a fast food joint, as there really isn't a lot of businesses around besides the gas station across the street, and the block the place is on seems mostly residential. The majority of the houses are one-story, and in various states of disrepair. There are 3 ways in and out of the store. There are 2 doors in the lobby. One gets locked at 8 p.m. for safety reasons, and the other gets locked at 10 p.m. when the lobby ends. It's common practice for employees to unlock these doors after 10 p.m. to go smoke. They stand just outside the door while smoking, then lock the door as they come back in. Sometimes they forget to lock the door behind them, and sometimes they let people in on accident. Now, whenever people come in after close, you can always tell by the door chime ringing throughout the place. And whenever that happened, 2 employees would go out to the lobby there that we were sorry, but the lobby was closed, and they'd have to leave. They've always left. It's never been a problem before. The other night, I was working with John, a tall black guy, and Katie, a short, cute redheaded girl. The shift was going as usual, albeit a little slow due to the falling snow. At about 1 a.m., however, we hear the door chime ring. The sign lobby door has been opened. John and I go prepared to tell whoever was in there we were sorry, but the lobby was closed, and they'd have to leave. You see, the 3rd way out of the building is a door in the very back of the store that they use to load food and stuff off the supply truck every week. It only opens from the inside, and an alarm sounds whenever you open it, and it keeps sounding until the code is entered. We rush to the back to check it out. The door is already closed. It shuts mechanically, but the alarm was still blaring. I enter the code to stop the alarm, and we look around. Nothing is out of the ordinary, but then we realize that John is not in the back with us. The door chimes. Katie and I run back out to the lobby to see John sprinting outside into the darkness and the snow. We don't follow. We are too terrified to go out into the night with whatever made John go crazy. We lock the door back up, figuring John will call us to let us know to let him back in. He can't be long. The snow is overwhelming, and he didn't even take his coat. He never called. He never came back. No one has seen him since. His coat is still hanging up in the break room. I knew what he saw that made him run like that. I want to know if he's okay. But I never want to know how close it was to being me that ran out into the dark.